So this presentation was a conference talk I did. I also did it at a meetup before that, and before that I did it as a guest speaker at the Iron Yard boot camp when that was a thing. But I always go through it here too. So the purpose of the conference version of this talk is to talk about how to make the move from junior developer or brand new developer to senior developer, and what you even need to work on, because it isn't always clear. You know you need to get better at the code, right? But what else is there? There's a lot more to being a good developer than just memorizing all the APIs in the world. You need to be able to be a good teammate and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the nature of this talk. I've given it for audiences that are primarily junior developers. I've given it for bootcamp audiences, and I've given it to rooms full of people who already consider themselves senior. And so for those people, the point is partially how to evaluate people and how to help them grow, because a lot of senior developers have no idea how to help the juniors on their team get better. So it's kind of about that. And so those people don't necessarily know me, so here's this whole slide again. So, senior developers, what are they? Here's the part where I tell a couple jokes that you don't need, because I know you're sick of my jokes by now. So, already talked about the purpose. It may be surprising to you how controversial this question is. What is a senior developer? The last time I gave this at an actual conference, 2 days before, so I'm always looking on Twitter to see who's talking about these topics so I can kind of get an idea of what other people are saying. And somebody tweeted his definition of a senior developer. It was just a bulleted list of traits, and it was an instant Twitter fight. I mean, people were so angry instantly with the first item on the list, which in all fairness was not a great list. But people get pretty worked up about this stuff. People have very strong opinions about what does and doesn't make a senior developer. So despite that, I'm going to weigh in with my own opinion. So hopefully you come away with this with some actionable steps for growth. You're not, you're students. You're not even junior developers yet, technically, but you are really. So it's not necessarily about how to become a senior developer as it is just how to become better. So career growth as a developer. So the most obvious trait, I think, that senior developers should have is technical capability, right? That's the easy one. That's the uncontroversial one. But still, what exactly that means, I'm going to go into quite a bit of detail about here in about 10 minutes. But first, I want to talk about Tony's scale of awesomeness. So Tony Dewan is a local guy here in Indianapolis who has taught web design courses at the college level. And he came up with this scale for his students to give them an idea of how he grades things, basically. But it's also a good list for professionals, I think, for judging your own work and kind of asking yourself, am I done with this thing yet? Is this thing finished? Is this good? So you can think of the scale that way as a general purpose tool to measure the quality of a developer's work. So this really is another example of breaking down technical capability into more detail without going into the other areas. So this is the scale, and that's Tony. Does it work? Does it work well? Could it work better? And could it work elsewhere? So first, does it work? Does it meet the functional requirements? Does it do what was asked? Okay, that's step one. Tony says you'll probably pass his course. At the professional level, you probably won't get fired if you at least make things work. Probably. But what do we think of someone who only does the bare minimum? We have higher standards for ourselves than that, don't we? Heck yes, we do. So once it works, we should ask, does it work well? Is the user experience acceptable? Behold the Norman door. named for the inspiration of Don Norman's classic book, The Design of Everyday Things. The door opens, but the user experience is terrible. You shouldn't have to print instructions on a door that tells you how to open a gosh darn door. So if you have to do that, you've kind of failed at designing the door. Probably they're just being cheap. They have that on both sides of every door. But come on. So we don't want our apps to be the equivalent of the Norman door. So it's not enough for things to work. They need to work well. If you meet this standard, Tony says you'll probably get a good grade, not just pass. In the professional world, people may like you. Yes, even you. The folks in sales and marketing, maybe even customers, will sing your praises because you've made their jobs easier by making a thing that works well. Other developers on the team, that's another story. They may still hate you. And remember, the developer whose life you make harder may be you. So, could it work? Or does it work? Does it work well? Could it work better? In other words, can it be maintained? Can it be refactored? What's refactoring? Remember refactoring? Yeah. Right. Change the structure of your code without changing the behavior. Exactly. Doesn't do anything different. The code's just different. Often for the sake of making it more maintainable. So part of the question here is, can anyone else read it? Can everyone else read it? Great. If you meet this standard, you'll probably actually get a job, Tony says. In the professional world, you'll probably get a raise if you can do this kind of stuff. You'll probably get a good job if you can write stuff that's actually maintainable. And I'm not going to lie, this poop's difficult. It can take as long to learn how to write maintainable code and readable code as it does to learn how to make things that work well. I've been doing this for a long time, an embarrassingly long time, and I still struggle sometimes to turn something from working well to actually being readable. Just look at sidebar.js. That thing still drives me crazy, and we just didn't have time to refactor it yet. But that component is hideous, but it works great, right? So as far as users are concerned, it's beautiful, but we have to maintain this mess. Code is read a lot more than it is written. Every line of code that you write is going to be written a lot more than once, or it's going to be read a lot more than once. So it is worth the extra effort to write something that's maintainable, and I'll harp on this a little bit more. And really, I can't emphasize enough, if you write unmaintainable crap, the developer you're screwing over may be you. It may be future you. A month from now, you'll hate your own guts, if you don't already. Which you shouldn't. Don't be like your Uncle Dave. All right. So, does it work? Does it work well? Could it work better? In other words, can it be maintained? Could it work elsewhere? Last point on Tony's scale. That is, could it be reused? Oftentimes, the same solution could fit multiple situations with just minor adaptations. And the ability to write code in that way is really indispensable. Put another way, can it be packaged and shared? We use a lot of external libraries. We've used, obviously, React itself. We've used Rebase. We've used Emoji Mart. We used Aphrodite. We've used a bunch of libraries that other people wrote. And they probably didn't write those things just because it's fun to write reusable libraries. They probably needed to solve that problem themselves for a specific project. But they took the extra time to write a generalized solution that other people can use. And it's just so much more useful. And they probably made it easier for themselves, too, because they actually took some time to think through what the API for this thing should be. An example of this, last fall, I was working for a client, and they wanted to integrate LastPass with their web app. And LastPass does not have, do you know what that is? It's a password manager. They don't have an API. They don't give you a way to just interface with LastPass from within another app. What they do have is a command line interface that you can use to add passwords and read passwords and stuff like that. So since I needed to add LastPass integration to this web app using Ruby, I could have just written a thing that made it work in that app. But I just put in a tiny bit of extra effort, and I was able to make an actual Ruby gem that you can reuse to do this. So now you could use that in another app too, because it's actually published and you can download it. Another time, about 10 years ago, I was working on a project with another guy named Miles, and we needed to print PDFs from a web app. Again, a Ruby web app. We needed to be able to generate PDFs. And we thought, well, the easiest way would be to convert HTML to PDFs, because we know how to lay out HTML and how to use CSS with that. And I knew about a command line utility, again, called WK-HTML to PDF, WK as in WebKit. And I mentioned that to Miles. So he wrote a thing that did that in Ruby using that command line interface. But then he took the extra effort to actually write a generalized solution that you could drop into any application, because he figured correctly it was not the last time we were going to be asked to do this. Yes, the immediate motivation was to print a very specific report. But generally, we wanted to be able to, anytime we needed, turn HTML into PDFs. So he took a little bit of extra time and made a Ruby gem, which is like a node module, but for Ruby. That does that thing, and now it's been downloaded 3 million times. And actually, if you go to rubygems.org and look at their tutorial, the example they use is actually Wicked PDF, the one he made, which I think is neat. So anyway, take the extra time to make a generalized solution if you can, and you'll probably not only get a job, Tony says, but probably the best job. So that is Tony's scale. Again, does it work? Does it work well? Could it work better? And could it work elsewhere? So while Tony wasn't trying to define what a senior developer is, he was just making a tool for his students, I think it's actually a lot better measured than a lot of others that I've seen. But this is all kind of still dealing with the technical capability piece. And I think there's more to it than that still. So let's look at the whole question of what a good developer or a senior developer is from a slightly different angle. There's a company called Frontside that wrote a blog post called The Conjoined Triangles of Senior Level Development, which is a silly title, but it's a really good framework for determining seniority, I think. So they define it as the intersection of these things: how well a person works independently and leads, how technically capable they are, the obvious one, and how well they connect and contribute to a larger community. How well they work independently and lead, i.e. leadership, how technically capable they are, i.e. technical capability, and how well they connect and contribute to a larger community, i.e. community. You like Venn diagrams? Everybody likes Venn diagrams. Here's the Venn diagram then. So, technical capability, community, and leadership. At the intersection of those things is the magical senior developer, presumably. But each of these three circles has a whole junior to senior track of its own. So if it's starting to sound like a lot of work, good, because it is. It's a lot of work to become really good at this job. So let's take a closer look at each one of those things. I haven't even defined technical capability adequately yet. So strap in, suckers. We're going to talk about technical capability. Has lots of APIs memorized, has encountered all these problems before, and so can very quickly just start coding without even having to stop and plan first, because they're just that awesome, right? That kind of stuff. Well, that's great if you can do that. But that Frontside post had a definition that I love. A person with high technical capability is technically curious, tackles problems without giving up, and produces solutions that less experienced folks can use, maintain, and learn from. A person with high technical capability is technically curious, tackles problems without giving up, and produces solutions that less experienced folks can use, maintain, and learn from. So this is more about aptitude than experience, certainly, and a senior developer obviously needs to have some experience. But we all already know that, so that's not That's not any kind of revelation. Exactly how much experience you need to be truly senior is difficult to say. But if you're off the charts in these areas, I think you'll meet my criteria for technical capability a lot faster than if you don't. If you have that curiosity, you almost can't help but improve, because you'll want to understand how things are done and how to improve your, well, at least it works solutions. You won't be satisfied with that. You'll want to know how it could be done better. I can already tell many of you have this curiosity. One would think that just the fact that you're spending your summer this way is a pretty good indication. So your curiosity will probably move you down Tony's scale pretty fast. If you tackle problems without giving up, you will become your boss's favorite employee very quickly. If this doesn't come naturally to you, because I not only want to define this thing, I want to help form a plan for how to improve. So if this doesn't come naturally to you, I do think you can improve in this area. It's not, if you're just the kind of person who doesn't necessarily stick with things when they get really tough, that doesn't mean you'll never make it. I think you can improve in this area. Hang around other people who don't give up, and see if it rubs off on you. When you fight through a really tricky problem and arrive at a solution, you get kind of a rush. It's a really good feeling. It can become addictive, and this is one of the few good addictions in the world, if you're addicted to like succeeding. So stick with things, force yourself until it becomes second nature. You can improve at this if it's not just your natural state of being. I know some people who they never give up on anything, and they were clearly born that way. But I think you can get better at this. Some experienced developers produce solutions that are too clever for their own good. They actually take pride in the fact that no one else can read their work, no one else can maintain it. They feel like it gives them job security. It kind of makes them jerks. There's the old hit by a bus thing. I say that maybe when you're in college you haven't heard that as many times as I've heard it as a professional, but like there's always the old, well, what happens if Dave gets hit by a bus, right? And then no one can ever maintain this app again. You got to make stuff that other people can use. Also, you can never take a vacation if you're the only person who can maintain something. What if something goes wrong and you're out of town? They're going to be calling you unless you wrote something that other people can also handle. So there's no benefit to writing esoteric nonsense that no one, including yourself, can maintain. You have to do more than produce clever solutions that work. It has to be maintainable by you and others. So, okay, that's the definition. But now that I know what technical capability is, how do I technical capability? Let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a young man with a nearly full head of hair, a spool of blank CDRs, a pair of 19-inch CRTs that weighed 40 pounds apiece, and a Palm Pilot. And this young man knew him some HTML, CSS, even some JavaScript, and some PHP and MySQL. He was ready to take the World Wide Web by storm. So he got himself a cubicle and some truly regrettable facial hair, and he became the person that a big data center, a big 40,000-foot data center depended on when they couldn't get the printer to work. I got to get that photo off the screen. So here's the building where it all went down. This is in Carmel. One day, this young man was probably resetting someone's password when he thought to himself, I could harness the power of PHP to make myself a ticketing system to keep track of all these requests that come in. Someone's printer's broken. Someone needs a password reset. I could just keep this in my email or in a text file or something. Or I could, since I know PHP, I could just make myself a ticket system real quick. Wouldn't take long. Also, there was a little bit of a grudge involved in this decision. One of the network engineers had taken a 1 week .NET course. They're like, look what I can do. You can't do that with PHP. Like, of course you can do that with PHP. I can do it in an hour. So I did. I mean, he did, the young man with the hair. So, okay. I'm the guy. That's me. Yeah. So took an afternoon to make a little ticket system that worked well enough that as long as I were going to be the only person who ever used it, would be adequate. And one day, my boss walked by, saw it on my screen, and he said, "Hey, the operations center could use something like that." No, he didn't yell it. He didn't look like Billy Zane, but that's what I found on Google Images when I searched boss. He was actually very nice about it. So he saw it and thought, hey, we could use this in general at the company. So just like that, I went from being the person who fixes the printer to actually being a coder for a living again. And so I was at that point the sole developer, and I got PHP on the screen there. I was the sole developer at a data center company, writing software that only my own coworkers would ever use. So I made all the technology decisions, determined the schedule because no one else had any idea how long any of this stuff should take. And I built the stuff by myself. And I cared about making things work and work well, and loved that the stuff I was writing was getting used every day and making people's jobs easier. And yeah, there were a lot of smiling people who liked that this stuff was there because they had nothing before. And it even worked well because I was very interested and curious in making it fairly robust and error tolerant. Think it could be maintained? Holy crap, no. It was an absolute maintenance nightmare. I was what's called a cowboy coder at that point. So cowboy coding is an undisciplined approach to software development that gives programmers complete control over the development process. I even did things like making changes to the production database directly. And hey, I only deleted the production database in the middle of the workday once. Okay, twice. But the second time was, okay, well, it doesn't matter. Truth is, I didn't know any better. Don't do that, folks. Don't edit things directly in production. But this was not a software company. There was no one else there to tell me how this stuff is done. I had an idea that this was playing with fire, but I had no idea how else to go about it because I had a CS degree. They didn't teach us any of that. They didn't teach us anything about like production workflows, and that probably the developers should not have the root login to the production database server or even the production web server. There should be a whole change management flow that goes on that moves stuff to the actual production server, not just a developer literally copying files from his laptop to a production server and then like hitting restart in the middle of the day. But I didn't know any better, and I didn't even know how to find out more because I did not know any other professional developers. I did not know a single one. I had no frame of reference. And I had that technical curiosity. I was always trying to get better. I was reading lots of books, but all of those books were just pure technical books, like here's how to do the code better, which I needed a lot more than that. There's a lot more to it than that. So I wasn't learning anything about the craft of software development, and they didn't really teach us that stuff in college. Maybe they're better about that stuff now. Hopefully you picked up a little bit of that from this boot camp. We talk about a little more about the craft than just the APIs. But I did not know a single other programmer, not one. So despite my curiosity, I was a cowboy coder churning out spaghetti code. Then something magical happened. I asked my boss if we could hire a second developer. And he said, yes. So we hired a second developer who immediately got hit by an SUV. Don't worry, he's okay now. He was back at work eventually. That's not really him. But he got hit by an SUV on his bike like week 2. His name is Miles. And guess what? Remember this slide from the very first day? Hey, that's Miles. He's right under the blue thing. He's the other guy in the picture. So he started there, and after I'd been there a few years, and he was a little younger than me, but kind of a similar level of experience, and he had that same curiosity that I did. And I grew so much so quickly just by sharing an office with someone else who shared my interest in getting better at this thing. So, he was reading different blog posts than I was reading, and we would share that information with each other. And he was listening to different podcasts and would recommend those, and I would recommend mine to his and all this stuff. And finally, I just had someone to talk to about code. And someone else had to read and understand everything that I wrote. Before, I knew I was the only person who was ever going to see this stuff, so if I wanted to take some lazy shortcuts, I could get away with it. Yes, I was making my own life much harder by doing that, but I also had deadlines and stuff. But now I knew every single thing I wrote was going to be written. Every single thing I wrote was going to be read by another person, and vice versa with his stuff. So that also made it a little more painful in the short term when you took lazy shortcuts. And there was just somebody else who, even though his experience level was very similar to mine, he shared that curiosity, and between the two of us, we kind of egged each other on and encouraged each other, and had a little system of accountability for learning new stuff. So he knew more about test-driven development than I did, so he taught me a little about that. And he, at that point, absolutely hated JavaScript with the fire of 1,000 suns. So I helped him chill a little bit about JavaScript and ensure him that it wasn't so bad, even though this was like 2007 and really it was pretty bad. But anyway, Miles also happened to be really, really outgoing. And he found a local meetup for us to go to. And suddenly, I knew lots of other developers, not just one. All of whom were technically curious enough to attend a meetup. And pretty soon, Miles took over that meetup, actually. I guess, who from the morning class went to NDRB? Yeah, that's the guy, right? And we both became much better developers in very short order. So here's some actionable advice out of that lengthy anecdote. Go to meetups. Indianapolis has a ton of great tech meetups. indiehackers.org maintains a calendar of them. Many of them are recorded every week. There are good technical talks every month. And just as importantly, you can meet and hang out with other developers. And there's a lot to be said for just hanging around other people who share that technical curiosity enough to show up to meetups. That is a lot of how I got better, was just going to these things and meeting other people. Even if I didn't have the attention span to listen to the talks every time, I was there talking shop with other people who were in the business, getting to know people. For a long time, Fretless pretty much hired exclusively people that we met through meetups, because truth is, we knew when we were doing almost nothing but Ruby, we knew all the Ruby developers in Indy pretty much. So we kind of recruited from there. So it's also not a bad habit to get into if you want to get to know the people who make hiring decisions. Yeah, wherever you are, I'm sure there are. I just know the ones here. Technically, I started the Bloomington Ruby meetup, but it's kind of on hiatus, in no small part because I just moved from there. So besides meetups, though, you can subscribe to newsletters, and I subscribe to all of those there on the left. They're excellent and free. Cooper Press is the group that publishes all of those, and they have a lot more, too. Seriously, they're great. I highly recommend them. That's Ruby Weekly, JavaScript Weekly, and React Status. So this is a large part of how I stay up to date on stuff, or how I attempt to stay up to date. I don't remember if it was this session or first session, but there was a new version of React released in the middle of class. And I knew because of the newsletter. Now, it was a very minor update and didn't break anything. But still, I kind of get an idea of the direction the community is headed, mostly from these newsletters and from Twitter and stuff. So also follow smart people on Twitter, follow the movers and shakers in the technologies that you're interested in. I can tell you some good people if you're interested in CSS or React or any of that stuff. Feel free to ask me and I can give you some recommendations. But like with these newsletters, I can't possibly read all three of those beginning to end every week. I don't read one of them beginning to end, but I do scan all the headlines. And I usually will open up a couple of articles in tabs to catch up on later. And I also just start to notice trends. So, okay, I see lots and lots of links about Vue.js, V-U-E.js. So I know that's a popular thing that people are really talking about now. I should probably sooner or later learn a little more about that. That kind of stuff. So you can at least see what people are talking about. Like when React 16 was coming up, I didn't play with any of the betas, but I saw that one of the things that people were talking about the most was the context API. And I knew about the old one and that it was experimental and they really didn't recommend that you use it, but I saw more and more people talking about it, so I knew this is probably a thing I should learn soon. And that's the thing that makes it easier to pass props around without having to go through every dang component in between. So they're really useful things to just kind of keep your finger on the pulse. So what else can you do to power up your technical capability? Teach. You don't need to be a senior developer before you can teach someone or give a talk at a meetup or even a conference. Junior developers, brand new developers give conference talks all the time. And incidentally, meetups are a great place to practice if you aspire to do that sort of thing. They're pretty non-threatening, tend to have very accepting crowds and so on. And you can talk about non-technical things, and it's great practice. But if you just pick a tiny little topic, if you do want to give a tech talk, like if you want to learn some little piece of React better, like you want to, I don't know, what are some tricky things we've done? Passing around functions as props. Maybe you want to really dig into that. Just promise some meetup that you'll give a talk about that specific thing. Then that'll scare you into learning it really, really well. And you'll give the talk, and you'll get questions from the audience or suggestions from the audience about things that you hadn't thought of, and that'll make you even better at it. It's a great way to get better. You already know a little more about something than someone. You can teach something to someone. Now you're all boot camp graduates. You could help other boot camp students. Just offer to meet someone for coffee and teach them a little something if you want. Some of you have already been helping your classmates, which is a really nice thing to do. This is how I learned React. I promised I would teach a React bootcamp. And I had wanted to learn it for a long time, but had no clients who were asking for it at the time. So I had never really had an excuse to devote the time. But then I promised that I would teach a React bootcamp, a multi-week React bootcamp. So that scared me into learning it. This is also how I learned Angular. This is also how I learned Node. I've used this trick quite a few times. I learn new technologies by promising other people that I'll teach it to them and just scaring myself to death. So maybe you don't have to go quite that extreme as committing to multi-week boot camps, but really teaching other people can be a really great tool for learning something better yourself. So be technically curious. Tackle problems without giving up, and produce solutions that less experienced folks can use, maintain, and learn from. Talk to other developers, go to meetups, grab coffee with someone, whatever. Subscribe to newsletters, listen to podcasts, etc. And pretty soon, you'll be saying, I am technical capability, and so can you. So that's technical capability, part 1. So on to leadership. A person with leadership skills knows how to develop and follow a sense of purpose in themselves and in others. How to develop and follow a sense of purpose in themselves and others. They're willing to point out, own, and fix things that are broken in their own organization and in their own career tracks. But how do I leadership? You could read some of the approximately 112 billion leadership books out there. A couple of those that are listed on that first page are really good, by the way. Radical Candor there, the second one from the right. That's a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. Start With Why is really good. The 7 Habits is a classic for a reason. There are bad leadership books too, but several of those are really good. You can listen to podcasts. Simple Leadership is a really good podcast. Manager Tools is excellent, but it does tend to specifically focus on management, not just generalized leadership. But they have, the same folks have another one called Career Tools, which I really highly recommend, even at this stage in your careers. The number of topics they cover is incredible, and it's full of great actionable advice They have a half-hour podcast on just introducing yourself to someone. It covers everything you could ever, every professional situation you could possibly come into. I don't know how many different ones they have on job interviews, but they have a ton, and it's all great advice. And you can always speed up the podcasts if a half hour on introducing yourself seems excessive. But it covers all kinds of stuff like, okay, if you didn't quite hear them, do you ask them to repeat it or not? I'm not going to tell you. Listen to the podcast. They have one on creating presentations, but I only got 8 seconds into it, so sorry. No, they have like 4 on giving presentations. Like they have one on just how to use your voice, one on just how to use body language, one on movement, which is different from body language. That's like, this stuff, not just this stuff, right? That kind of stuff. So consuming information on the topic is great, but even better is talking about it with other people. Find other people that you can talk to about this kind of stuff. Maybe you can find a buddy locally, maybe a mentor, or maybe just someone at your own level that you can talk to. If you find a more experienced person that you want to learn from, just offer to buy them coffee or something. Even if they don't drink coffee, they'll probably at least meet you and drink water. That's how I met Dana. She invited me to coffee. I don't drink coffee, but I happily had some water and talked to her. If you can't find someone locally or you're just too darn shy, join a Slack group. There are a lot of Slack groups about this stuff. You should all join the Indie Hackers Slack group. Go to indiehackers.org, and I think you can find the link to the place where you can invite yourself to the Slack group. And there are tons of separate channels in that group. There's the general Indie Hackers. There's a Women in Tech one. There's engineering management. There's a bunch of different channels in that Slack group, and it's really good. You don't even have to be an Indianapolis person. Talk about experiences, trade stories, learn from other people's successes and failures. Learning from your own is great, but if you can learn from someone else's, you can save yourself some pain sometimes. And it's worth pointing out that this doesn't necessarily mean becoming the Harvard Business School ideal leader. You don't have to be the most extroverted person in the world in order to lead. One of the quietest people I know is an incredible leader. Dave Jones, who was at the Indy RB meetup, for those of you who went. Incredibly quiet person, but such an amazing leader. He has that sense of purpose, and it's contagious. When he joins a development team, because he does the same thing I do, when he joins a development team, the whole team just gets better. It can't not happen. He just does that to people. So do this stuff, give it a shot, and pretty soon you'll be saying, I am leadership, and so can you. So that brings us to community. This definition is really long. A person with community skills has a sense of being part of a larger whole, a desire to contribute, and a sense that the other people around them, coworkers, users, clients, are not simply characters in their own movie, but fully realized individuals. A sense of being part of a larger whole, a desire to contribute, and a sense that others are not just the supporting characters in your own story, but fully realized individuals. So it helps not to be a psychopath. Community sounds a lot like empathy here. And I know a tech leader in Indy who values empathy above all else when hiring other developers. Like this is like when he talks about job interviews, like that's one of the main things he's looking for. Is this person a decent human being who can get along with other people and who understands where other people are coming from? And it's one of the harder things to develop if it doesn't come naturally to you. Writing code that other people can understand and learn from, which I've harped on already quite a bit. Writing good commit messages. Oh, for heaven's sake, please write good commit messages. Giving thoughtful code reviews. Being receptive to other people's reviews of your code. Helping others grow. Taking direction from others. Accepting feedback. Being part of something that's bigger than yourself. All of that. That's all part of being part of a larger whole. As far as a desire to contribute goes, maybe that takes the form of making open source contributions. Maybe it means participating in Indie Civic Hack or volunteering at a school for Hour of Code. It doesn't have to mean those things, but those are great opportunities to get involved and start to feel like part of something bigger if you can't find that at your job or at school. So heed these words, and soon you'll be saying, I am community, and so can you. I do want to talk a little bit more about this, though, the community thing, but I'll come back to it in just a second. So that's the diagram, and I'll be frank, very few people reach the senior level in all three categories. Very few people even want to. At Fretless, we use the same measure that Frontside, who came up with this diagram, although theirs wasn't this pretty. We use the same measure they do, which is that if someone has reached the senior level in technical capability, because there's just no way around that, and at least one of the other two traits, and they're at least mid-level in the third, then we consider them a senior developer. So high technical capability and high community skills, senior developer, as long as you're not just a complete leadership disaster. Technical capability and leadership and not a psychopath, great, senior developer. All three, I don't know, mega senior or something. What if you have both leadership and community skills, but your technical skills are still at a novice level? That's the case with a lot of career switchers. Now, you're all like actually studying this thing to go into this field on purpose. But like Dana did something else for years. She had a totally different job. Well, she had several jobs, but she worked in a different field and then decided, heck, I'm going to be a coder. And so when she decided to do that, she was already, all that experience she already had was super relevant. It wasn't technical, but she came into this field having already achieved a very high level of community and leadership. I mean, like off the freaking charts. She is Miss Community. Hi, Miss Community. Yes, good job. Yeah, see, that's the kind of experience I'm talking about. So, don't think any of that other stuff is a waste of time. It's all relevant still when you become a developer, because my gosh, it gives you a leg up on some of the folks who do this, who just sit in front of their computer all day and refuse to interact with other people. I'd way rather hire someone who is really strong in those areas and on the technical side at least exhibits that curiosity and doesn't give up, and is interested in developing solutions that other people can learn from, even if they don't know how to do that yet. If you have that drive and you're good at the other two things, I'd way rather work with you than someone who is a coding wizard and a jerk, or a coding wizard but very lazy about writing solutions that other people can learn from. So all that stuff's important. We have twice now at Fretless, and we're a very small company, we have twice hired bootcamp graduates who were really strong in the other two areas and weren't real strong at technical capability yet. Okay, 3 times, actually, now that I think about it. Which is every technical person we've ever hired except for our very first hire, which was Dave Jones, who we'd already worked with at another job. Let's see. Yeah, if you take nothing else from this talk, let it be this. The technical capability is not enough to qualify as a senior in our world. No one with mad technical skills and a surly attitude wants to hear that, but we can't deliver and maintain the kind of products we need to based on technical chops alone. So we try to work with our employees to help them grow in the areas that they're interested in improving in, and we try to provide an environment in which they're able to do so. Hopefully you're able to do the same. Make a plan to grow in these areas, and soon enough you'll be saying, I am senior, and so can you. Once again, I'm that guy.